Welcome into another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. You better not have touched that dial if you were listening to Supersize Sports with Kev and James just before this. But this is going to be a relatively short one compared to our, hour plus long live shows that generally take place Tuesday night at 9/8 Central. Truncated version to make up for the one I missed. I was down with a sickness, but we are back in action. So we're just gonna break down some of the more interesting Week 4 matchups, as well as a little bit of I've got the Thursday night football game on in the background as well, of course. I will give it a second for people to kind of roll in here as I get everything set up. Let's see here. All right. Week 4 is when it starts to get real. I just did a podcast with friend of the show, Simon Short, for the Simon Short podcast. And we actually talked about some teams for which we would completely hit restart, reset. 3 games in, you've kind of seen enough from certain teams, and for certain other teams, like my favorite team, the Vikings, you're starting to see who are the real contenders. At least we can prognosticate a little bit, more firmly and from a more informed standpoint, as you've seen a few matchups from these teams coming into this season, and teams have answered a lot of questions. So Week 4 is going to be another big one. 17-12, Dallas over the Giants. 5 minutes left in the third quarter as I speak now. And, there's a few of these matchups that are looking pretty juicy that you might not have thought in the preseason that they'd have these types of implications at this point in the year, as well as, just some interesting things you've seen from teams that you either want to see replicated, you want to see against different competition, or you want to see how they match up against other teams who have been intriguing to this point. A couple of those, and one we're going to start with here. Vikings-Packers is going to be a huge one, but I did like 20 minutes on that game that is up on the channel right now if you want to go check that out at one point or another. But one I want to start with is Eagles-Bucks playoff rematch. It is going to be – this is both 2-1. Eagles have shakily gotten out to 2-1. There's been a lot of they could very, very easily be 3-0. Don't get me wrong. But what's been interesting about this team is especially and we talked at length about the Falcons game with the Saquon drop that led to the inevitable Kirk Cousins game-winning drive with no timeouts. What's up, Barber? Thanks for tapping in, my friend. Not gonna talk too much Vikes. I do have Kwesi in the background just for good vibes, but I did like 20 minutes on the Vikings Packers game, pre-recorded. That's live on the channel as well. If you do want to check that out, skull to you, my friend, as well. But Eagles-Bucks. So Todd Bowles' defense against this Eagles offense under Kellen Moore for the first season now. What's going to be intriguing about that is Todd Bowles is going to send pressure. And to this point this season, the way the offensive infrastructure and Jalen Hurts individually have handled pressure has been better. The particularly the back half of last season was really rough in that department. And Todd Bowles, I think, is going to test that and going to try to push those buttons. He is an audacious defensive coordinator who loves to blitz, and even shorthanded against the Lions, did some really good stuff to throw off what Ben Johnson and that group likes to do. So that'll be an interesting kind of chess match there between Bowles and Kellen Moore. But also curious to see what we're going to get from this Eagles defense. Now, it's been on paper, you're like, yes, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, who's going to run against this team? But the way they've been deployed under Vic Fangio has been questionable at times. You've seen a lot of Milton Williams at the one technique, playing like a shade nose, more often than not on passing downs, but they've gotten run on out of those sets where it feels like a no-brainer. Like you might be overthinking things if you don't have Jordan Davis, shade nose, Jalen Carter at 3 tech, just the same way they lined up at Georgia and dominated people. That's one where it's like, okay, are you going to, kind of, and he very rarely does, and his disciples very rarely do. Are you going to break from some of your principles to really lean into the personnel you have and maximize that, as opposed to square peg, round holing certain players for what you want to do on the whiteboard? And this Bucs offense has been really good under Baker. He's been targeting Chris Godwin a ton, as well as Mike Evans. But when you have both of those guys really humming, it's a difficult unit to stop. He has a great connection with Cade Otton. The running back room has been dynamic, particularly out of the backfield as pass catchers. So this should be 2 playoff teams the way it looks right now. We're going to talk a little bit more about the rest of the NFC South with a cool matchup coming up as well. But, it looks like, and myself included, it looks like there's a lot of folks who overlooked the Bucs to repeat as NFC South champions. It's a little hot and cold there, but Baker's looked really, really good early on, kind of riding that momentum from the end of last season and sort of really earning every penny of that extension, entering that Geno realm of kind of career renaissance. Even though when he was discarded from the Browns, it wasn't necessarily like, Baker's washed, or we've seen everything we need to see from Baker. I think that was a huge misstep from Cleveland. I'm sure a lot of people can agree as well, but drop down in the comments below who you've got in this game. We're going to talk about a few, just the matchups that stick out to me. If there's one I don't mention, bring it up. If I haven't talked about your favorite team, bring them up. Let me know what I'm supposed to watch out for in their matchup this weekend. Real quick, we've got still 17-12 in the Cowboys-Giants game. The Cowboys are wearing these, I hate these uniforms, these terrible like early 90s knockoffs. But the Dallas front has looked better and, dare I say, good tonight. And it's been a while since since you've seen something like that from them, even under Zimmer through the first 3 games. Got absolutely worked by Clint Kubiak and the boys against New Orleans. One of the worst run defenses in the league to this point. And what they've done so far this game against a middling Giants running attack has been pretty promising. They really needed to come out and show some life in that department, in that phase of the game. Dak and Daniel Jones, for that matter, have both been dialed. Last I checked, quarterbacks were a combined 33 for 38 before I jumped on live. I'm sure they've thrown a few more since then, but we'll kind of keep track of that game as well as I'm live here. Next matchup I want to get into a little bit is that other NFC South matchup that, again, if you talked about this in the preseason and you said, hey, how consequential do you think Saints Falcons week 4 is going to be? You'd probably say, well, the Saints probably aren't making much noise this year. Falcons should be in contention for that division. They're going to have to take care of business, but you'd probably favor Atlanta in those games. Oh, geez. Kev is in the building. What is up, my man? Nate is speaking a language I don't understand, but welcome in, brother. Saints Falcons. The Falcons defense to this point in the season has been really impressive in my opinion. Particularly, the Jesse Bates acquisition was a home run. He's still the best, if not the best safety in general in the league. He's the best center fielder safety in the league. You could talk about more hybrid guys like Kyle Hamilton or what have you, but what he's able to do in the deep middle, taking away, either hash and what he's able to do out of single high. And then you bring over Justin Simmons as well. Judon hasn't made a ton of noise to this point, but what they've done on the defensive side has been pretty impressive to this point. But what they haven't quite had to contend with yet is a running game like we've seen from the Saints to this point. I thought this was Stu for a second. Dweeb in the building. What is up? And again, this is, as you can imagine, son of Gary Kubiak, Shanahan lineage, under center, run the ball down your throat, play action, hit the deep shot in, at timely points in the game. And much of Derek Carr's production has come from under center play action, turning his back to the defense and letting one rip. It's how they've gotten Rashid Shaheed open deep so frequently. And the weapons they have, another thing too, just from a macro sense this season in the NFL, you're seeing these bell cow running backs having a good season and looking more like, Alvin Kamara's pushing 30. Derrick Henry still looks sharp. A lot of guys around the league, have brought a lot of value to their offenses running the football. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the run rate across the league is up. The run efficiency across the league is up, and it's I know Mel. I don't know if you heard Mel Kiper bitch about the too high safety structures, but you're seeing the counter to that in real time. It's run the ball, make them roll a safety down. You can't, Patrick Mahomes has the lowest average depth of target in the league right now, and that's one of the better offenses. It's back to basics. You're playing real football again. Establish the run the football, play defense. Defenses have caught up to these offenses. So this matchup is one that I think is going to be a really interesting reflection of that in what the Falcons do to counter what the Saints have established through 3 games. And again, how the Saints counter that back. Are you able to get ahead of the sticks and get into second and shorts and draw up these play action shots? Are you able to maintain that dominance you've had on the ground? Or if they counter that, they stack the box. They go to more single high structures pre-snap and aren't able to fool around with like eye candy on the back end from the defensive side of the ball? Are you going to be able to punish single high safeties on the boundary with Chris Olave? That's going to be a really fun chess match. And this is a big time divisional game now where the Saints could take a 2-game lead on Atlanta with a win here, and be right there with Tampa Bay. The Falcons have sputtered a little bit early on, but you've got to think what you've seen from Cousins starting to get into a rhythm again, starting to connect with guys like Pitts and London, and the run game looks pretty sharp. That the duo of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier is one of the better duos in the league, and it's a strong run blocking offensive line. They've just been put in a lot of disadvantageous positions with the way that offense has operated. Ton of pistol, much less play action than you'd expect from a Kirk Cousins-led offense. And, I think just hamstringing guys like Caleb McGarry, having him, straight up pass block with no play action to kind of help. But this should be a fun one. You might see some fireworks, frankly, if the Saints are able to. I don't think they'll be able to do quite what they did to Dallas, but if the run game's explosive again and they are able to set up these deep shots and Derek Carr stays hot in an election year, you might see the Falcons really turn it up on the other end as well. And this game you could see a lot of points and a lot of explosive plays. So it should be a fun one. Drop your prediction down below for Falcons Saints coming up on Sunday. I believe it's at Atlanta, although I might be wrong. Yep, at Atlanta at noon. So another very interesting one there. There's a couple matchups this week that it's like, you've got Pittsburgh going into Indianapolis, and that's one where you're just like, all right, show me something when you talk about Indy, because on paper it looks like a bloodbath for the Colts offense. But again, it's a really dynamic running game if they lean into it. And when you've got it's sometimes it's hard to aim the cannon on Anthony Richardson's shoulder, but when he's lining up that deep ball, the guys like Alec Pierce, Ashton Doolin at times, who's got some speed and got some juice, that can be really dangerous, especially if defenses are forced to crowd the box. But again, like from a Pittsburgh perspective, Indy's been a bottom 3 run defense throughout the season. DeForest Buckner injury exacerbates that. And so it could be another Steelers ass grinded out 15-10 final. And just another one where they're able to grind it out. If Fields can keep playing mistake-free. Both of these quarterbacks really, in this matchup, it's like, are you going to be able to take care of the football to the point where, as the quarterback, are you being able to take care of the football to where you can let your skill players and your defense decide the game? Once you get there, I think it becomes a much more even playing field. But again, if that Steelers offense is able to run the ball as effectively as every other team has been able to on Indy, it's another one that could get ugly and might not be terribly fun to watch, depending on what your flavor is in a football game. Let's see what else we got here. Rams Bears could be kind of fun. What the Rams were able to do last week to come back against San Fran showed a lot of life. Masterclass from McVay. Stafford was dialed. And if that keeps up, if he's able to overcome all the injuries on the offensive line against the Bears defense that's been really, really good early on, that could spell trouble for Chicago at Soldier Field. But it should be a get-back game for Caleb Williams and that offense, considering how terrible the Rams defense has been for long stretches of this season, or games throughout this season. It's a very, like, there's a lot of very promising pieces on that unit, but there's no Aaron Donald to just kind of bring it all together and plaster over a lot of the holes they have. Like, there's no Aaron Donald to draw doubles against the pass and say, okay, hey, Kobe Turner, go beat a one-on-one. And he was fantastic when he was given one-on-one matchups as a pass rusher. Now you've got Kobe Turner kind of sliding into that Aaron Donald role, and he's not the player Donald was, of course. Bobby Brown at nose tackle is interesting. Byron Young is a freak athlete off the edge. They play like Michael Hoyt, who's pushing 300 pounds. They play him as like a hybrid 5 technique. Sometimes he'll stand up in a 2-point stance as an edge rusher. Really fun player. But again, and James, if you're still in the chat, he knows all too well. The Rams just kind of cut bait with Ernest Jones, who, in Aaron Donald's words, was, kind of the next up for that mantle. He said, hey, when I retire, this defense is EJ's. He retired, and they were like, all right, well, I'm trading EJ for a 5th-round pick, and we're going to start something called a Christian Rose boom and Troy Reeder at inside linebacker and see how that goes for us. Paid Trey White, Cam Curl, interesting pieces in the secondary. It just hasn't come together at all. So if there's going to be a game where the Bears are able to get things on track and press the buttons they want to with all those weapons in the receiving core, if there's a game where that offensive line is able to kind of come together and have a strong performance and build some confidence and build some cohesiveness, it's this week. So there could be some big questions that get answered in this matchup. And both teams 1-2, both teams at the bottom of their respective divisions. For week 4, it feels like a pretty big gotta-have-it game for both teams as far as their playoff aspirations go. Really, really quick, Bengals visit Andy Dalton for the Andy Dalton revenge game. And this could get really funny if the Panthers pull this one off. Not only from like an internal perspective for Carolina, like 0-2 with Bryce, 2-0 with Andy Dalton, and all of a sudden the offense looks professional. But also from a Cincinnati perspective, where if you walk in like you walked into this season with that defense, letting DJ Reader walk, Jesse Bates we talked about, aging corner, so I get it, Chidobe Awuzie. If you walk in there with Trey Hendrickson in a prayer and lose this game to Carolina, that's going to be a really, really tough pill to swallow. Going to 0-4 as a playoff hopeful team is going to be very difficult. And you've got an offense that should be contending. And so if you fail that group with what you've put out there on defense, and Lou Anarumo, I'm sure has had some late nights trying to figure out what he can do and what levers he can pull to get this defense where it needs to be. That is going to be nightmarish stuff for Cincinnati, the staff, the roster, the fan base, if they go into Carolina and lose this game to Andy Dalton. But as an impartial fan, it can only be funny or it can only be funny, or it can be what should happen, which is the Bengals taking care of business, getting back on track a tiny bit against what's largely considered the worst roster in football, top to bottom, especially with Derek Brown out for the year. It was probably their best player on either side of the football. A game that's a lot more interesting than it probably you'd think it would have been coming into this season is suddenly Washington at Arizona. Two offenses that have been really interesting. And again, if you're still in the chat, drop your predictions down below for these matchups. We can talk about it. I'm not necessarily picking anything. I'm just kind of pointing out what, some fun angles for it, at least from my perspective. But two offenses, a former Cliff Kingsbury offense and a current Cliff Kingsbury offense in Arizona and Washington, respectively. Two really, really dynamic, multifaceted quarterbacks who can manage the pocket, escape pressure, get efficient gains on designed runs, extend plays, keep their eyes downfield. Both have a beautiful deep ball. I mean, this could be another no punter, like we saw with Washington Cincy. You never really know. Both defenses have a couple interesting pieces. You got Budda Baker. You've got Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, but not great groups. So if you want to see some fireworks in that afternoon window, check out Washington, Arizona. Let me know in the chat if you think Jaden Daniels, he's not going to keep up 91% completion percentage, but if you feel like he can kind of ride this wave and continue like the Rookie of the Year campaign, frankly, that he has through 3 games, if he can stay sharp, stay mistake-free, it could be a really fun game. And Kyler has played brilliantly through a few games this season. Starting to connect with Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, one of the more underrated tight ends in football, and they're still running the piss out of the football. They're still doing all this 12 and 13 personnel and just saying, hey, are you really going to not match this with base? Because we'll do this all game, just like they did last season without Kyler. Now you had Kyler into the mix, and it's like, okay, now this is a really pick your poison type of offense when Kyler can make all the throws he can, everything he can do off script, but they can also stay right on script and just beat the shit out of you up and down the field. The way these tight ends block. Zach Ertz has been really solid this season. It's a really fun team to watch, and their offense in particular. But for Washington too, so I'm expecting fireworks there. You might see another 38-35, 41-38, something like that, which would be really, really interesting. And I'm just pulling up actually some numbers for both of these groups. Washington's been running the piss out of the ball as well, only a 46.7% pass rate. But both teams are – so the Commanders are actually 6th in yards per pass play. They are, and again, a lot of this has to do with that Bengals matchup, 3rd in EPA per pass, Washington. Cardinals are 7th in EPA per pass. Total time to throw, they're both the Cardinals are 3rd, and that's a lot of that's Kyler extending plays. But what's interesting with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, you look at his time to throw through 3 games, fastest in the league, 2.43 seconds. He's playing on time, on schedule, making quick decisions. He's been tremendous as a processor, and he's feeding Terry McLaurin. Finally, you finally saw Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels connection. I don't think Terry McLaurin's lost much juice, if any. He just hasn't gotten the target share you'd expect over the past prior to week 3 over the past 19 games. So that's been really, really puzzling. But now I think they're back on track. And, again, both these quarterbacks are going to be really, really fun to watch. So that's one of the sneaky, really good games to check out this year. Browns, Raiders, who gives a shit? Chiefs, Chargers should be really interesting. The Chargers are here, and they're playing the way we thought they would under Jim Harbaugh. They are lining up on offense and saying, hey, are you going to stop what we do? You know it's coming. We know it's coming. We're going to run it down your throat. We're going to throw it maybe 20, 25 times a game if we have to. We don't really want to. We just want to beat the shit out of you with one of the better tackle duos in the league and an offensive line in general that with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman calling that offense has stuck to its guns. So is that a team that's going to be able to win the time of possession battle against Kansas City? You're at home where you're going to have, half a stadium or so of your fans cheering you on. The rest will probably be Kansas City or empty. But not much home field advantage going on there. But the defense has also been pretty impressive. They've been hitting at all levels. And it's the best defense they've played in a few years now that they're finally moved off of this Fangio disciple, defensive mastermind, gap and a half, quarter, half on the back end, 4-man rush, come and get it. They're finally off of that, and now things seem to be clicking. And a lot of it's mentality, and a lot of that's from the top down. And Harbaugh's really established that culture immediately. I picked them to sneak into the playoffs, and that's really the only reason. There wasn't an analytical standpoint. I didn't have some, super specific take that was me just really kind of sifting through things and matchups and whatever. I was just thinking every time Jim Harbaugh goes to a new place, he just wins immediately. Stanford, San Francisco, Michigan. Shows up, wins. Shows up, establishes his culture, plays football the way he wants football to be played. I love that I'm just doing the Kwesi thing this whole time. And they've been really good. Chiefs are 3-0 with it's like a plus 12 point differential. It's not crazy. They've been eking out some games, but it's just one of those teams that when it comes down to it, end of the game, they just execute. And it was a defensive pass interference. It should have been called. Likely's toe was out. Should not have been a touchdown. They're winning these games. It just hasn't been handily. They haven't been blowing teams out. But they're capable of having a big explosive game. And you wonder if it could come against the Chargers, who, from a talent standpoint on the defensive side of the football, it's okay. It's not a great unit on paper, but they're playing really well. And if you can shave down the amount of possessions you give to Patrick Mahomes, I think that's exactly the way they're going to approach this game, and it could allow them to pull this one out. Casey's a 7-point favorite. And Herbert might be out. Am I? Because I heard he was. He had what was his tackle duo? I know is banged up, but I thought they were going to go. Let me know in the chat if you know if Herbert is going to miss this game. I haven't checked on that, actually. I got to figure that out before I tell you it's going to be a good game. Okay, limited at practice today with the ankle sprain. You got to think he's going to. You got to think he's going to want to go. You got to think he's going to get up for this game. And again, they haven't been putting a ton of stress on him as the focal point of the offense, throwing the ball a bunch of times. They've been really allowing that offense to flow through the run game and come down to timely throws from Justin Herbert. Last game I want to touch on just a little bit is actually, you know what? Sunday and Monday night are going to be really fun. You got Bills Ravens. Ravens at 1-2. A Mike McDonald-less defense has looked good but not great, and all of a sudden you've got this just absolute steam engine of a Bill. That actually sounds a little demeaning. Jet engine of a Bills offense that through 3 games looks insane, and a Ravens defense that still has a lot of those pieces. But can they hold that down, and can they continue to replicate what they've done on the ground game to this point against the Bills defense that hasn't necessarily been the reason or the driving force to their undefeated record, missing a lot of guys, a lot of injuries. Matt Milano went down in the preseason, but they've held their own. The Ravens, though, 19 explosive runs through 3 games. It's runs of 10 or more yards between Henry and Lamar. I think Justice Hill snuck one in there too. But that run defense or run offense has been fantastic. It's been as advertised, as much as, as much as like a discerning eye people had on it in week 1, even through week 2. I think it was an emphatic week 3 performance. Like, hey, this is how we're going to play football. It's going to work. Watch this. And it did. And Henry looked great. Lamar's looked great. I just think it's going to come down to Ravens defense, Bills offense. And can you at least slow them down? Because I think the Ravens will be able to keep up if it doesn't get all the way out of hand. But, man, Josh Allen has been dialed. He's finding Khalil Shakir. He's finding Keon Coleman. James Cook's been fantastic. So it's going to be a tough group to slow down. And the big one, another team like my Vikings, the Seattle Seahawks, 3-0. Geno Smith's been unbelievable. DK Metcalf's been great. There was a play that was highlighted. There was it's a too high beater that could turn into a quarters beater or a cover 2 beater based on a read. And this is a read that DK Metcalf and Geno Smith are making in real time and connecting on. Last week it was a dig and go essentially from DK Metcalf, big deep in, and it's too high. So if it was cover 2, you've got half field safeties, so the dig should be there. So he would follow through with that route over the middle, find the window between the hook defenders, drill it 15, 18 yards, line it back up, huddle up. But they saw quarters, and in quarters, the difference between a half field safety at too high, in quarters, again, you've got 4 deep. So your cornerbacks are going to have the deep boundary. So as a quarter safety, you're taught to trigger down on in breakers like a dig, and that safety to his side of the field, DK was lined up out wide to the right. As soon as that safety bit down and went to cut off the dig, like as you do out of that coverage, DK burnt it upfield, had the safety have to turn his hips and run with him, and you're just not gonna run with DK Metcalf if you're flat-footed for even a second. And they hooked up on that one. Geno threw a beautiful ball, and that was one of the easier passes, frankly, Gino's had to make. He's been throwing some tight window fucking seeds this season. He's been really, really fun to watch. If you're not on the Gino train yet, just watch him some more. His pocket management's unbelievable. There was a graph that was posted that was essentially trying to show how often quarterbacks were pressured and how often that pressure was a result of the quarterback. Is it the quarterback inviting pressure? Or is this just on the offensive line? How is the quarterback navigating the pocket? Is he bailing out of a clean one to turn this into a pressured play? And Geno Smith was all alone, like damn close to 0%. Bryce Young's, for example, was also all alone at like 45%. So just what he's been doing to manage the pocket, rescue the pocket, keep eyes downfield, throw into tight windows. There's a lot of fuck you throws that Geno Smith makes that just exude the confidence he's gained since getting into Seattle. It's just throws into windows that you're like, man, why did he even it's a perfect ball and he got it there. You know, it's he has a lot of those no, yes kind of throws where it's like, I don't know how many quarterbacks are even having the balls to uncork that thing, let alone get it there exactly where it needs to be. And a lot of weapons on that offense as well. Defense, this is a Mike Macdonald defense. Comes over to Seattle. He's got that group playing really, really well. Big bounce back year for Reek Woolen on the outside. Devin Witherspoon's a maniac. The new safety duo has looked great. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup when they go. You got Mike Macdonald against Ben Johnson, two of the hottest names in the head coaching carousel before, Ben Johnson decided to stay for, you're thinking just one more year as OC of the Lions to try to go get themselves a Lombardi. But, man, that's going to be a fun matchup on the chessboard. Mike Macdonald, Ben Johnson, Lions offensive line, Mike Macdonald's fronts. That's going to be fun. And you're also going to see Geno on the offensive side with all those weapons. The run game's been pretty good against Aiden Hutchinson, who's having a Defensive Player of the Year type start to his season. With, there's some other pieces there. DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil has been great generating pressure from the interior. And these young corners who have been playing really well through 3 games in Terry and Arnold. Carlton Davis has looked good in his first season with Detroit. So this could very well be the best game of the week. Just from these are probably 2 real heavy hitters in the NFC, the way it's looked through 3 games and the way we felt about the Lions coming into the season. And what Mike Macdonald has done to take this Seattle team to the next level. I think if we were sure Jordan Love was playing and we were sure he's going to be 100%, you'd probably have Vikes Pack in that mix as well for a really fun matchup. Again, if you haven't seen it, like 20 minutes on that game in particular. That's live on the channel now. You can go check that out. Vikings Packers preview by the numbers. Just broke down, what could go right for both teams and the matchups of both units. It's a really fun matchup to take a look at, regardless of who's under center for the Packers, given the way Matt LaFleur has concocted that run game to this point. But that's all for me. Micah Parsons knifes into the backfield to bring down Singletary for a loss. Oh, my God. He just shook Andrew Thomas out of his shoes. That was hard. That was barely a pass rush move. He just Euro stepped the shit out of an all-pro tackle. That was really fun. 3rd and 6. Micah's in the A-gap. Jones can't sneak the slant in there. Can't sneak it to Wandale. Jordan Lewis has been playing out of his fucking mind this season in the slot for Dallas. What a play. Oh, actually, he probably should have hung on to that. I thought Lewis got a hand on it. Really good coverage. Anyway, Cowboys Giants, a more interesting game than you might have anticipated, but the Giants are kind of starting to figure it out a little bit. That will be all for me. If you haven't already, hit that like button, drop a comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. We will be live again Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Central Time or something like that, maybe 8:10, 8:15. Talking everything from week 4, kind of recapping everything I previewed here, and talking a little bit more about the upcoming week, injury news, implications, all that jazz. In the meantime, you can find my written work. I cover the Vikings for zonecoverage.com. My assignment with them has just been Brian Flores film breakdowns weekly, just kind of what happened in the past week, how that might be applicable to the upcoming matchup. That's been really fun for me. I think it's a fun read too, if that's something you don't watch as closely. Always some all 22 clips attached to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about there, and what the Vikings have been doing so well defensively. You can also check out on Wednesdays on the channel another damn fantasy podcast hosted by our good friend Trevor, keeping you up to date with all that fantasy mumbo jumbo, who to start, who to sit, who's trending up, everything you need from a fantasy standpoint Wednesday nights. And then you may have seen this right before I went live, Supersize Sports, hosted by Kev and James, talking everything sports until the basketball season, when my understanding is that'll transform back into the bounce and be an NBA-centric program. But a few live shows every week right here on the channel. Again, subscribe if you haven't. Thanks so much for tuning in if you did. And again, like, comment, subscribe, stick around. And thanks for watching.